Hey guys, Devin 3000 here. Thanks for everyone for tuning in to this special webinar. Uh, Surely everyone in the Tri-State Smash community has been aware of the past incidents and allegations that have come across our scene in the past month. These are all very serious things, and even though our scene is large, we're still relatively immature in a lot of areas, and in general, our scene is pretty young, and so a lot of people aren't necessarily equipped with how to deal with certain situations. When everything's hunky dory, then there's nothing to worry about. But not things aren't always hunky dory. So we have teamed up with our CASA, speaking with Representative Alex, who will be on here shortly, to give a presentation followed by Q&A on sexual harassment, personal conduct, just to try and give the tools to you guys, everyone in the scene, for how to see something if something is happening to another, or if you're yourself is in a position of danger, that you're more equipped to recognize and how to better, confront it. So with all that, hi Alex, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Little nervous, but I'm excited for this presentation here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me. It's fine to be nervous because these aren't topics that a lot of people go over super frequently, so it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Like us ourselves, aren't clearly not going to be like the most equipped for situations like this, which is why we want to reach out to, people like you who are much more trained in this area to do so. I guess one more thing to point out on this call, we have Churb from Collision Series. Churb, if you want to introduce yourself, just so that everyone knows.
Hey guys, it's Chirp here. I am the community manager of Collision Series, and we've been working together with House to uh, put in, introduce a lot of things that are going to, make Tri-State Smash a better place for people now and in the future. So I'm really glad that we are having this right now.
Yeah. And then also we have Dill on the call here.
Hello. Yeah, you guys all know me. So yeah, we're just trying to really give everyone the ability to take action on this sort of thing so that we can really just move forward into a brighter chapter where we're all actually aware and accountable, and hopefully nothing like this ever has to happen again within our nice little community.
Yeah, and I guess the one last thing, I may have jumped the gun a little bit on introducing the others, but Alex, if you could, give a little bit of your background and Arcasa as an organization and all that.
Yeah, sure. So I've been at Arcasa since 2017, but I've been doing sexual violence prevention and advocacy for about 7 years. Arcasa stands for Rappahannock Council Against Sexual Assault, and we're located in the Fredericksburg area of Virginia. We serve Planning District 16, which is Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Stafford, Caroline, and King George. But we're always very open to assisting anybody from anywhere. And our services, like our hotline or our online support groups, are also accessible to anybody, no matter where they're from.
Awesome. Okay, so I think with that, I'm going to be muting myself up. And so if you're ready to go along with the rest of the presentation, Alex, we can go from there.
All right.
All right, perfect.
So I'm just going to dive right in. Just to clarify a couple other things, the pronouns that I use are she or they. So if you're talking about me in the third person, you can do that. I like to make this pretty interactive. So if you have questions, please feel free to pause. Just pause me wherever I'm at. It's totally fine. Some things might need more explanation for some people. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being like, what the heck does this mean? Or can you give me an example? So consent is really the most important thing when thinking about preventing any type of misconduct, whether it's sexual violence, any type of oppressive behaviors, racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, anything like that. But a lot of times when we talk about consent, it's presented as specifically, especially in a sexual context, in a very direct way. So I tend to take a tack from it that's a little bit different than you might have heard before. I view consent as a discussion about boundaries. So even if I say yes to something or I'm open to something with certain people, there might still be limits or conditions there. So, for example, I might be totally fine with showing my face on a video call with somebody that I already know. Maybe we've been friends for a really long time, and they already have built up a level of trust with me. I might not be comfortable doing that with a total stranger or somebody I don't know very well. So just because I have certain boundaries with one person doesn't mean that those boundaries are the same with everybody. And those boundaries might still be limited or changed around in some way. So an example of that would be if I'm dating somebody and then they break our trust in our relationship, maybe by sharing intimate things about our relationship with somebody else, I might not feel very comfortable telling them those more intimate things in the future. So when we're thinking about consent, it's not just a, well, you said yes one time, so we're good forever, or, well, you said yes to this person, and so why won't you do the same thing with me? Our boundaries are usually built on the trust that we have with different people, and that might take a lot more time in some scenarios to build up. People also have to be aware of what they're consenting to in a situation. So this is why when a lot of people talk about sexual consent, when they're talking about how alcohol comes into play with that, when someone's under the influence of alcohol or other drugs, they're not as capable of reading other people's body language, giving off their own body language in a clear way, and they're just not as capable of understanding outcomes of certain decisions. So it's not that somebody who is drinking is less intelligent for any reason. It's more just that they're not in the position to make a serious decision, right? We wouldn't be okay with somebody who's like signing away a contract to buy a house when they're completely drunk, right? We would think that that's probably a risky decision. So for the same reason why we don't let somebody drive when they're drunk or make big important life decisions while they're drinking, we don't necessarily want somebody to be making decisions about their sexual safety if they're not in the position to view all the potential outcomes. We also say that consent has to be informed because people have to know what it is that they're consenting to. If I don't have all the information, if someone's purposefully hiding things from me, then I'm not able to fully understand what the outcomes of that decisions are. All the information, if someone's purposefully hiding things from me, then I'm not sorry. Able to. Okay. People can also change their minds. We know that our boundaries can change with people if they break our trust or if that trust is building up. Our boundaries might become more flexible. But there also just might be something going on where somebody's just not feeling a certain situation today. They're not feeling a certain level of physical or emotional intimacy. So it's okay for people to change their minds. It's not a personal reflection a lot of the time. And just because someone's done something before doesn't mean that they have to do those same things again or with another person. And a big one is that you can't give consent on someone else's behalf. I see this a lot, especially in non-sexual situations where someone will be like, oh, let me just share this person's picture or their information because I know that that's something they're comfortable with without asking if that person if it's okay. We can't just decide for other people what their boundaries are, and especially if someone's experienced something like sexual or domestic violence, then that could actually be a safety concern. If they're not wanting a certain person to know where they're living currently, where they're going to school, where they're working, that can actually put them at risk if that information is disseminated without their consent. And that's something I see a lot, especially in online spaces, because we don't tend to think of how much information we're sharing online is truly accessible to people that we don't even know, right? If I post a picture wearing my college sweatshirt on Instagram, if my Instagram's public, now somebody knows where I go to college. A big thing when I was going to university is that people would then also take pictures with their dorm mates in front of their hall signs. So if my Instagram is public, you not only know where my college is, but you also know what dorm I live in. And I might not be thinking that anyone who has nefarious purposes can see that, but that's still a thing that if I have also shared my friend's picture and her Instagram's private, now everybody can see that same information, even though she's not the one sharing it. And this is really the biggest thing about consent that I see a lot of people struggle with that really needs to be gotten across a lot more frequently is if somebody feels like they have to say yes, if they've been intimidated, if they've been pressured, if they've been manipulated, then that's not actually consent. If someone's only saying yes because they can't say no, then that's called coercion. That's not a consensual interaction. So I describe coercion as manipulation. It could look like threatening someone or blackmailing somebody or just putting a lot of pressure on them. So saying, I did this for you, so now you owe me. Right? If you really loved me or if you were my real friend, you would do this for me. You can't just change your mind. Or what about if I just do this thing? So instead of like, oh, well, what if instead of having sex, what if we just like cuddle with our clothes off? That's not a big deal. Or what if I just do this thing instead of that thing? Anytime somebody's pressuring someone else to do something after they've already said no, or even if they're just not giving an explicit, enthusiastic yes, then that's coercive, right? Not respecting that no. This is the one that I see a lot of people struggle with because we oftentimes think of sexual violence or sexual harassment as very violent or very aggressive. And these statements don't necessarily feel like they're violent, but they're not consensual statements regardless. That makes sense to everybody? Does anybody need me to go over anything before I move on?
No, that was all pretty straightforward. I
Right.
think for sure, like the idea of people like taking for granted that, oh, you're like familiar with like what this person's done with other people. It's like just being very aware that it's always different for you with that person, and like it's always worth asking and like making sure something's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Because just because somebody's like really open with me doesn't mean they want everybody else in our friend circle to know those same things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially here because we're like a pretty small community, so everyone, like you can really see people interacting with a lot of others, and it all feels like it can be somewhat of the same circle. So I'm sure that's come up in our community.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I also want to talk a little bit about power dynamics because I feel like, especially in online spaces, those can seem a lot less present when you're not necessarily meeting in person. But even when you're meeting in person, if it's about like something fun, like a game or a fandom or a show or something that you're involved in, sometimes it doesn't feel as structured. It doesn't feel like that hierarchy really exists in the same way. But when we talk about power, a lot of times in our culture, power is presented as the ability to make other people do things, which unfortunately is a really unhealthy take on it. But when we think about power dynamics in terms of consent, it's the power that people have, not just legally or financially, but in a social context. So if I'm working for somebody and my employer asks me on a date, if I say no, then they have the power to fire me, give me a bad review, give me all the horrible tasks that nobody else wants to do. But I don't have the power to do those same things back, right? So my employer has more power than I do because of that situation that we're in. Even if I'm not physically at work when they ask me about going out sometime, they still have the ability to punish me in that setting. Same goes for if somebody's a caregiver and they're dependent, right? So if I depend on somebody else to meet my daily needs, to access medication, to get from point A to point B, to be access food and bathing and things like that. If that person has power over me in that sense, a relationship between us can't really be as equal because once again, they can kind of punish me in ways that I can't equally hold them accountable for. Student and teacher, unfortunately, I see this one a lot. That again, the sense of a teacher can create a uncomfortable situation in a classroom, and the student can't really hold the teacher accountable in the same ways, right? The teacher could give me a bad grade. The teacher could not recommend me for honor society or other student awards, things like that. Um, the student can't really do anything going back that other way. And minors and adults also. Now, a lot of people tend to focus on what's the legal age because in different states and different countries, the age of consent might be different. But when we think about just in general, people who are younger, their brains are not as fully developed. It's not that they're less intelligent, they just literally haven't been spent enough time alive for their brains to fully finish forming. A lot of times they might not have had a lot of relationship experience and they don't have a lot of social power in our society. I see somebody asked the question, if both parties are intoxicated, not like blackout, can't function drunk, can one party consent if the other asks them to have sex, or would that still qualify as an intoxicated person not being able to consent? That's the question that I get a lot. Pretty much every time I talk about consent, people have questions about alcohol. I think there's a lot of elements to consider in that. So, one element is if somebody who, for example, weighs 280 pounds and is 6'1", has 10 shots. And then you have somebody who's 5'4", 120 pounds, same number of shots, then you might have incredibly different levels of intoxication. But in general, I just don't suggest mixing alcohol and sex at all. I'm not saying that it's impossible for two people to be drinking and have a sexual interaction that nobody feels violated and no one feels uncomfortable. I just personally think that because alcohol inhibits your ability to understand outcomes and make healthy decisions, that it's best not to mix those two things. Does that make sense to everybody? Is claiming mixed signals related to coercion? That's another question. Yes. I see that a lot. People saying, oh, well, I see sometimes people saying, like, oh, well, their mouth said no, but their action said yes. Or, oh, well, I wasn't really clear. So I just felt like they were teasing me or something like that. When we're thinking about consent, we want the answer to be super clear. So if someone's giving mixed signals, then I would automatically just assume that that's a no, right? And if it's a situation where somebody doesn't feel like they can openly communicate with me about what it is that they want, and that's their responsibility to learn how to communicate that, right? Because I don't want to risk the fact that I'm making somebody uncomfortable just because I think that this is all part of like a game that we play. So sometimes people also might give mixed signals because they're uncomfortable. They feel like they have to say yes for whatever reason. I know a lot of young people feel like they have to have sexual relationships once they get into a romantic relationship, that they think that's just part of being in a relationship is you have to provide sex. So sometimes there's that pressure of, I don't really want to do this, but I feel like I'm supposed to, or I feel like I have to. So if you're having open and honest conversations and letting people know, hey, if you don't want to do this, that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. I don't ever want you to do anything that you feel uncomfortable with. And you get used to having those conversations, even if they can be a little awkward at first, then that can be a really great way to establish that consent is a main part of that relationship. And if just because one person doesn't see a situation as violating, so sometimes naturally I'll run into a scenario where someone's like, oh, well, I don't really feel like what I did was that bad. They're really upset about it, but I don't think it was that serious. It's not about what we intended to do. You might not have intended to hurt that person, but the impact might be very severe, especially if they have already experienced sexual violence at another point in their lives, and this might have been re-traumatizing for them. Okay. I see someone asked, if someone were to notice signs of coercion in a public environment, what could a third party do? We're actually going to get to that in a few slides. So just like put a pin in that and we will get there. But I like that we're already like thinking about that. I do want to ask, because I have an example on the slide, so y'all can post in the chat if you'd like, or the other people who have their mics on can also respond. So just going over that minor and adult part of power dynamics. So let's say, in theory, we have a 25-year-old and a 17-year-old. So what can the 25-year-old do in society that a 17-year-old can't?
Rent a car.
Rent a car. This is true. They might have more access to transportation. Also probably more likely to have been driving for a while, or they might have a car of their own and the 17-year-old might not. They can drink. I see multiple people
Biggest
posted
thing is
that.
drinking, yeah.
Yep. 25-year-old can also buy alcohol, right?
Oh, they can also buy smaller things. Not smaller things. But they can also buy things like cigarettes as well. In New Jersey, at least, where the age of buying cigarettes is 21.
Yeah, so they can buy cigarettes, they can buy alcohol, go into bars. They might be more likely to have a college degree. They might be more likely to have a job where they have employment benefits, have a permanent place of employment or more stable finances. Enter radio contests. I've never gotten that response before, but that's a good one. Gambling, renting a hotel room. Right. So, in a lot of these situations, the 25-year-old has a lot more access to things, right? So, the 17-year-old might feel like by engaging with the 25-year-olds, they then have more access to things through that relationship. But the issue with 17, whether that's the legal age or not, the 17-year-old's not less intelligent. They're just less experienced in a lot of ways, and they have a lot less access on their own. So the problem with the situation like that, where maybe in this particular state or this particular country, it might be legal for the 17 or 25-year-old to interact, but we see that the 25-year-old still has a huge amount of power that the 17-year-old doesn't yet. So I like to use this scenario just to clarify why, while looking at it from a legal standpoint is obviously important, we also want to look at it from a social standpoint as well. Everybody good for me to click to the next slide?
Let's see, chat.
But yeah, and I definitely think that's really interesting just to like go into like a social experience. Like it's gonna have more weight to it based on the difference in ages. Just to like actually like be careful and considerate of like that sort of thing happening. Just like knowing who you're getting involved with and like what might not be jumping out to you as what are the actual differences between you and the person you're engaging with.
Yeah, for sure. Because I see a lot of people kind of use whatever the legal age is as kind of like their get out of jail free card. And that like, oh well, it's not that bad because like it's not illegal in wherever I'm from, but there's still a lot to think about when considering power and what some people can and can't do or haven't done. And this is especially important when we're thinking about the process of grooming. So I don't mean like doing your hair, doing your nails, or anything like that. When thinking about when somebody uses connection in order to facilitate abuse, usually that person is an adult, and the person they're grooming is a minor or a young person, but it can also just be any situation where one person has more power. So a lot of times the person who is trying to create access to a potential victim will encourage them to believe that you're the one who tricked, seduced, whatever, manipulated me, right? Even though you're the one with less power, less experience, or who's a younger age, you're the one who wanted this to happen. And by encouraging the person to believe that you're the one who's responsible for this and that you enjoyed my coercion or my abuse of you, that will prevent the victim, obviously, from reaching out for support, right? They're not going to tell a friend or a family member or somebody in their community if they think that it was really their fault. And a lot of times they'll convince the person that what happened either didn't count. So it might be like, oh, well, you were 17 and I'm 25, but it's not like you're a child. You're a 17-year-old. You're only a few months away from being 18. So that doesn't really count. Or they'll convince them that if anyone finds out about what happened, that they'll also get in trouble. I see that a lot with situations where it's more like the employee or employer or a teacher and a student. I see that like encouragement of we'll both get in trouble and you don't want that to happen, do you? To kind of coerce the person.
So I think what's interesting about this sort of thing is if these relationships aren't like if you're not going into it with like the intention, but like feel like if you're 25, you're very aware that you have more access to someone just even subconsciously, you know it, but you're not like, so you're kind of like sharing it with someone, but you're not like doing it to be in a powerful position. So it's like if those people aren't being cautious of the power dynamic, like how is a good bystander to this situation act really?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we trying to just like inform people to be very cautious of, hey, if you're dealing with someone older than them, obviously we want everyone who's older to like just be very aware of like these power dynamics, how they exist, but also just like people's friends, like any bystanders around
Yeah.
this. Like,
I think it is important to be aware that like if you're interacting with people who are much younger than you, that you do have some level of power and access, and just recognize like, okay, if I ask somebody, hey, do you want me to give you a ride home? Like, might that make them uncomfortable? Or should I give somebody options, right? Hey, do you want me to like give you a ride home? Or just making sure that there's always the opportunity for them to say no and for them to feel like they can place boundaries with you. Same with friends. I always am like, I'm not saying that adults and minors can't engage in healthy ways in a particular space, like a gaming community or a fandom or a Comic Con or anything like that. But whenever there's this implication that, oh, you're just as mature as I am, you're just as empowered as I am, that there's no real difference between us, the age is irrelevant, that's where I kind of see some red flags go up. Or in situations where people present younger people as being even more mature than they are, that's usually where I find some concerning things. But some flags that like a friend or another community member could look at would be if one adult is kind of hyper focusing on a particular young person or a couple of young people, and they're giving them a lot of extra attention, a lot of like gifts or rewards for giving them more access to their life. If they're always emphasizing how mature or experienced that person is, or if they're like presenting it as, oh, this person's like even more mature than I am, and if there's sort of an escalation over time with the behavior, so maybe it starts out with, oh, they just make some like off the cuff jokes sometimes that are like kind of weird, but everybody's laughing, so it's fine. And then over time, it's like a lot of touchy feely behavior, putting their arm around the person, um, kissing them on the cheek, like cuddling them all the time. And then all of a sudden, it's like, let's hang out one on one, nobody else around. Let's like actually spend a significant amount of time together, right? So we're seeing that escalate over time. It gets more and more invasive. A lot of times they'll also label the relationship as like, oh, we're one of a kind. Other people just don't understand because they've never had something this special. It's true love, so it's okay that it started out in kind of a weird or creepy way. If they want a very intimate or serious relationship very quickly, so it's like, oh, you've been talking to somebody for a couple weeks or a couple months, and all of a sudden it's like, I wouldn't be able to live without you, like I want you to move in with me, I want to take care of you forever. I've seen that before. And then just isolating the victim from anybody who potentially threatens the relationship, even if it's just something that's like, hey, I feel like it's kind of weird that you're 19 years old and you're hanging out with like a group of 35-year-olds who all talk about you as if you're their future you're their future spouse or something like that. And then all of a sudden it's all right, we can't talk anymore because you find something weird about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can somebody be groomed if they aren't a minor? Yes, I just talk about it in terms of minor and adult because that's something I see very commonly. But it's very possible for someone to groom someone else, even if they're both adults. A lot of times, the person who um, is perpetrating the abuse in that scenario will still have some level of popularity, power, and a lot of times the person that they're honing in on will be somebody who doesn't have a lot of connections or doesn't feel supported or validated by a lot of people in their life because those people are a lot easier to build a really serious connection with because they're already looking for that in their lives.
So talking about popularity is like that's something, you know, like for the power dynamic, it's like you were saying, like a teacher can actually, you know, give a student a bad grade or whatever, or an employer, you know, deny an opportunity. But here in the Smash community, we have a lot of, you know, like top players are very like entrenched, like figures who are just like, you know, they're very popular. They have a lot of like pull, but they don't necessarily have a direct power over anyone. So like, how would you talk about like that type of power dynamic?
I think like with popularity, the thing I see a lot is does this person kind of get away with things that other people don't in the community? Like are they kind of allowed to do more things because they're popular? Are they allowed like if they say one thing and somebody who doesn't have that same level of popularity says the exact same thing, are there harsher consequences or do they get a special amount of attention and space and time in the community? Because, and also, like, do they actively use that popularity against other people that they don't like or people that they just disagree with? Because usually, if somebody's doing it in that particular way, then they're going to also use it to manipulate other people in maybe more private settings. I don't know if that answers your question.
It was it pretty much covered it. I was just thinking about it, and I don't know. I just wanted a general
Yeah.
synopsis of it.
Yeah. I saw somebody ask, is there something that you could suggest we do to discourage grooming when it's over DMs? I think if there's a general understanding of what it looks like in a community, that always helps because then people don't reach out for help if they don't know what they're going through as a problem. That's probably one of the biggest issues I see in our area is people don't ever let anybody know that they need help because they don't think it's a situation that they need help for. They think that, oh, this is just a normal relationship. This is just how it is. So education's always good for that. But I think also just creating a community where people can feel like they can openly talk about it or ask for help is a big deal. So that's one reason why I was really pleased to see your um, tip line that you had, because I think that's a really big step in letting people feel like it's okay to come forward and that they can do that in an anonymous way.
Yeah, thanks. We really just thought it would be an important way to have people being able to voice concerns even if they're kind of like unsure of how important it is. Because like obviously if you're in a sort of a weaker position in a relationship, you're not even, you know, like you're saying you might not even think there's a problem, but even if you think there's kind of a small problem, you might kind of like be wishy-washy about like, is this actually serious? Am I just like in my own head? No one else seems concerned, and if no one else is feeling concerned, then you know.
Yeah. And I think that that's like talking about like it's not a big problem because a lot of these things escalate over time. If somebody sees that, oh, if I push on these small boundaries and nothing happens, then a lot of times they will escalate to pushing on bigger boundaries and getting more and more sort of bold with how they're violating other people's spaces. So even if something is small, especially if you're thinking in more of like a restorative or transformative justice framework of if we educate this person now, then they'll stop doing it, as well as like other people will be comfortable with reaching out for help before things have to get really, really bad. It definitely, like, addressing problems when they're smaller is definitely easier.
Yeah.
I saw somebody asked a little bit earlier if you notice someone's using money as a form of power to hold over someone. That's definitely a big issue as well. Controlling people's finances. So some things I've seen that were helpful for that, besides like the obvious of like crowdfunding or donations, is making sure people have access to what we call like a safety plan or an escape plan. So, like, can they leave cash at someone else's house? Can they open a bank account that the other person doesn't have access to? If they don't have any knowledge of how to do that, a lot of like domestic violence and sexual violence resource agencies can actually walk a person through how to do that. And then just also letting somebody know that, hey, like if you need, like if I'm like paying somebody to babysit and they tell me like, oh well, if you give me cash, my partner will just take it when I get home. I'm just letting them know like, okay, how about instead of paying you in cash, I just like write a money order directly to your bank account or something like that, you know? So just trying to be creative sometimes, but sometimes it really does, it can get tricky with money for sure, because that's one of the most difficult things to get people out of unhealthy relationships. Sorry, it kind of took a little diversion from there.
I actually think that question may have been more about, more like just like people, like older people with more access, just like having more money and like
Mhm.
sharing opportunities with younger
Ah,
people.
gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely an important point. People using money and the power that comes with that. Because somebody, again, might feel like they have to do something because someone spent a lot of money on them, or, oh, well, if I do this thing, then later they'll pay for this or they'll buy me this. In some states, I don't want to like get into it too much. In some states, that based on what's happening, that can actually be legally considered sex trafficking. But in a general sense, if somebody's only doing something because they um, need money for food, for housing, for anything, because human trafficking is based on like fraud, force, or coercion in order to provide sex for money or for goods, that can definitely fall under the umbrella of sexual violence. I do want to, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I also wanted to add that patterns of this kind of abuse that like you might see in the Smash space can be, I guess, what the question asker might have been referring to was, there are people who consistently offer to pay their entry to tournaments or will be like, oh, I can cover your hotel fee or I can cover this or that, so that the person who is undergoing this eventually feels like indebted to the other person in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if somebody feel nobody ever has to provide any kind of relationship, whether it's romantic or sexual, regardless of if the other person has bought them things, paid for things, anything like that. Relationships don't have to be transactional in that way. So it can be considered a form of grooming. When I said earlier, like a lot of extra attention, rewards, or gifts, if someone's specifically using that, oh, well, I'm going to pay for their entry into the tournament and then use that to kind of prove to them that they now owe me something, then that is coercive.
Thank you.
I have this slide just because I think, in my experience, a lot of people tend to minimize their experience or don't really know how to identify whether they quote unquote count as a survivor of something. But anybody who has experienced sexual violence, whether it was recently, whether it was as a child, or a lot of people that we see experience multiple assaults over time, They might have experienced sexual harassment all throughout their life because of how they exist in society. And then they might also have had a relationship that was violent, or it could be somebody who maybe has been in multiple relationships that all had a sexually violent bent to them. It can look like a lot of different things. But a lot of times, sexual assault will co occur with other things like the financial abuse that you were mentioning, physical violence, or emotional abuse. And an abuser or a survivor can be really anybody. It can be somebody they've never met before, just sending them harassing messages. It could be their current or their ex partners, a family member, somebody that they maybe know from the community but haven't really interacted super closely with, or somebody who has a power over them. And we're seeing a lot of people who've experienced violence, maybe not super recently. A lot of them are being triggered by the pandemic because they're being restricted from going certain places, because they're just under a lot more stress, because they might have lost their job or can't go to school, or school doesn't look the way they thought it would, or because they can't access services that maybe they were doing in person. So it's important that if somebody has experienced something already, even if they're not currently experiencing it, they might be having symptoms of trauma that are coming up a lot more. And there's different ways that we can talk to a person like that. I see somebody asked, is coercion just sexual stuff, or can it be non-sexual? Coercion can occur just in a general sense. If I just make somebody do something they don't want to do, if I manipulate, blackmail, pressure somebody, it doesn't have to be sexual. But the context I'm speaking from is a sexual context, because we're talking about sexual violence. But it's similar to how, if I'm talking about abuse, that could be emotional abuse, it could be financial abuse. But since we're talking about sexual violence, I'm coming at it from a particular lens. Somebody asked a little while ago, if I see a minor being flirtatious or promiscuous on social media or at an event, what should I intervene to prevent harm? I think that it's very normal for teenagers to act in a quote unquote promiscuous way, because we've been taught when you're an adult, you get to do the things that you want to do. And we've also taught, especially young girls, that the way to indicate that you're an adult is through expressions of sexuality. So it's important that any adults that they're engaging with do not respond in that sense. It can be as simple as like taking the people that maybe they're flirting with aside, or messaging them privately, being like, yo, this person is like 16, this person's 17, whatever the age is, and just letting them know not to respond to that, because at the time, the minor might not view what's happening as unsafe. But I've seen this a lot, where somebody who was sexually assaulted or abused as a teenager at the time thought that it was just part of a normal relationship, and then as they got older, felt very, very differently about it. So just making sure that they're also in a safe space, letting them know, like, hey, like, I just want to let you know, like, in this space, we don't want there to be a lot of sexual talk, or a lot of any type of sexual behavior while we're at this event or in this particular online space. I'm also just making sure that they're clear on the rules for that. And also, sometimes it can be helpful to also just remind them that, like, you don't want to make other people uncomfortable as well. So being like, hey, like, we don't want anybody that you're talking to also feel uncomfortable because you're making a sexual reference to them as well. Does that make sense? All right, I'm gonna move on then. I always encourage people to share whatever resources they have. So I know that that's a really good way for us to address people who maybe have already experienced sexual violence, but maybe they haven't told us directly yet, making sure those are available. And it's good because we want people to have a lot of options. Some people might feel a lot more comfortable talking to somebody they know. Some people might be a lot more comfortable talking to someone anonymously. It can take a while for people to find the best fit based on their individual needs. And I always suggest reaching out to multiple sources because not everybody can also do all the same things. So, for example, the house is not a legal resource, so they can't open a criminal case against a particular person. Usually, a rape crisis center cannot do that either. But if somebody is connected to a lawyer, that lawyer can do things through a legal sense, but the lawyer is also not a great person to go to for like emotional support or if you're in the middle of a crisis. So making sure people have different kinds of resources that they can access for different things. And also it can help to meet short and long-term needs, right? So if I report to a anonymous like using the anonymous tip line that you all have, that might help meet my short-term need of I need to immediately feel like I'm being heard and that I'm being listened to. But if I'm looking to get something more long-term, like a protective order that's going to last me a couple of years, I need to go to an actual like law enforcement agency for that, or another resource that does that. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. I see somebody asking, what are the sort of things we should look for at tournaments to spot abusers? I ask this because currently things like a 25-year-old carpooling alone with a 16-year-old kid isn't considered weird. Well, that's very weird outside of the community. Again, I'm sure there's different norms in your community than there are in some other spaces. But just anything where one person seems like they're getting a lot of attention from someone else who has a lot more power than they do within the community. Because, like, if I give a 16-year-old a ride one time or a couple times because we live in the same area, that's might not be as weird as seeing us then later, like, cuddling on the couch where, like, the 16-year-old sitting on my lap, right? So, any kind of just like behavior that seems out of place for those individual people where it's very intentionally focused. And then also just seeing people kind of push little boundaries. Something that I have seen so much is where if I'm interacting with two people who have an unhealthy relationship, a lot of times one of those people will try to bait the person in front of me or push a smaller boundary. And that's usually a sign for me that they're going to push that boundary later. So they'll be like, hey, I'm going to take a picture of this person when they're not looking and send it to over Snapchat to make fun of them. Isn't that funny? And of course, like to me, that's really disrespectful. But also that means, well, if they're doing that in front of me, in front of other people, what are they doing behind closed doors? That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess just like in general, if you see anything that looks a little bit strange, like take a moment, especially if you're like friends with someone, to like try and imagine how compounding it is with every other interaction you know that's going on between two people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because usually if people are pushing small boundaries or in general find it funny to like disrespect people's boundaries, usually they feel that way in a private setting as well.
What would you recommend?
Some ways you can start a.
I was going to say, what would you recommend someone does if like a small boundary is being pushed? Should they be like, so just like once you start realizing the things might not be what you think, like what would you even recommend someone doing in that situation? Is it like approaching the person you're dealing with, just like trying to like cut it off, like just speaking to your other friends and...
You can do any of those things. Different people are comfortable with different levels of confrontation. So like for me, I might directly say to that person like, well, that's pretty messed up. Like you should not do that if you like want to have a good relationship with this person. Sometimes it's like going up to the person you're worried is experiencing harm and just being like, hey, it seems like you've been going through something. If you want to talk, I'm here for you. Sometimes it will look like letting other people know who have more power or popularity or pull in the community, and kind of seeing if they use that in an appropriate way. So there's different ways to approach it. There's not really a wrong thing to do. Well, I guess that's like situational. Sometimes in a situation, there's wrong things to do. But depending on your comfort level, you can directly tell the person that like that's a boundary that you that they shouldn't cross, or you can reach out to the other person and see if they're okay.
And I guess something that's just
I
like,
think
oh, I was gonna say
Yeah.
something that's just worth trying to normalize. Is like if you feel uncomfortable with something, like it's completely valid, and especially if you're going to, don't be concerned about bringing that to someone who you're trying to have a trustful relationship with, right? Because you should assume they're going to respect every this feeling you're having.
Mhm. Yeah, like open communication should be a normal thing, right? If I'm in a community space and I feel like I can trust these people, then I feel like I should be able to let them know if something's really bothering me or something seems really uncomfortable.
And it also just
I
like, oh, sorry. But
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I would say it creates like an opportunity to like, you can really start seeing like, oh, does it continue to escalate? You can really make things kind of clear for
Mhm.
yourself. As long as you're keeping that open level of communication, you can sort of make sure things, you can hopefully avoid them
Mhm.
escalating by just like making
Yeah.
sure, oh yeah, like it's not going to get past this point. Like once you're, like as long as you take
Mhm.
all your discomforts seriously, then like hopefully it never gets any worse.
I see one person also said, is pushing boundaries always a form of coercion? Is there a healthy way to just say, like, if you're not comfortable with X, what about Y? Yeah, there is a way to do that. I think with coercion, it's more about somebody who's already kind of given their answer and you just don't like the answer. So you're trying to change the answer into the answer that you want. Where that's more of where I'm coming from with coercion, where instead of being like, okay, well, you're not comfortable with meeting up in person, what do you think about doing like a chat over Zoom or a chat over Discord? Offering like an alternative option isn't really coercion, especially if you're trying to address a particular thing. Like, for example, someone says, I don't really want to meet in person because I'm still worried about like catching COVID. I'm saying like, okay, well then here's a solution that takes that condition into account. Whereas coercion would look a little bit more like, oh, come on, like I thought you said you really wanted to meet up. I thought that we were really vibing with each other. Why don't you want to meet in person? Like, have you just been playing me this whole time? Is that why you don't want to meet me? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And someone said, how can you avoid retaliation for calling out bad behavior? I think that that's something that I find really difficult to answer because you can't really control other people. And especially if they're abusive people, there's not really a way based on your behavior to prevent them from doing anything to you. What you can do in a general sense of community is making sure that you have other people who have your back in a sense. I'm sorry. I know people are hearing like message notifications from me. I'm trying to figure out how to mute that. But I have multiple windows open, so it's a little difficult for me to do multiple things at one time. So I'm sorry about that. But I think that in order to reduce the risk of retaliation, having options for anonymous reporting, having options for um, situations where maybe you want to share that something's happening with a person, but you don't want to necessarily be involved in like the confrontational part of it. Anything like that. Just having options can be helpful in that regard.
So an idea about anonymously reporting something but trying to avoid retaliation. It's still like, I could imagine someone feeling cornered in the fact that if something came back around to that person, they'd still know whose story it is. If someone's interacting with just one person.
Yeah. It's hard when it's interacting with a single person, but the more people that are involved, it's kind of like building a team of people that can all help and maybe help in different ways.
Yeah, I guess the best thing you could possibly do is make people aware of it, but also once you
Mhm.
realize you're uncomfortable with the situation, just phase yourself out of it, you know?
Yeah, definitely respecting your own boundaries for sure.
Mhm.
Typically, I also suggest people not be judgmental when they're listening. Remembering that it's always the abuse is always the fault of the abuser. The person, a person actively chooses to try and control, harm, violate another person. It's not because somebody acted a certain way, dressed a certain way, drank a certain amount. They didn't just magically make somebody decide to cause them harm. And a lot of times, putting those value judgments of, well, you should have done this, you should have done that, will make somebody feel like it's their fault, even if you aren't intending to make them feel that way. Because we don't know if maybe if I'm in an abusive relationship with somebody and I break up with them, that's actually the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is after the relationship's over. So saying if I was like, oh, well, I stayed with this person for another few months just until I got my safety plan in order. If someone's like, oh, well, if they hurt you, you should have just broken up with them. That might have actually made me more unsafe. Also avoiding why questions. Sometimes based on the role that you're playing, if you're like in a law enforcement perspective or a legal advocate perspective, they might ask a why question, but that might not necessarily be information we need to know. If we're just trying to be a friend and trying to help support a person, we don't really need to have all the details of, well, why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? That sometimes will just make a person feel really defensive. And it's always important, even if someone already knows, to remind them that it's not their fault, that they've experienced abuse or violence.
Yeah, I could imagine that even if you're trying to like come up with solutions for them, it's like priorities first though. It's like if someone feels unsafe or like they're not in a situation where like everything's as it should be, first you just want to get rid of all of that before you start worrying about like, oh, how did this even come about? How could you have avoided it? Like it's just sort of not what's at the front of the issue.
Yeah, exactly. Too far. A lot of times, like this sounds kind of like woo, but validating feelings is kind of the main goal if you're just being a support person, because we can't change the feelings. And a lot of times we feel like we want to fix stuff. We want to make the person feel better. We want to rescue them. We want to save them from whatever they're experiencing. But that's not always within our power. So making sure that we just are letting the person know, like, yeah, I am the way that you feel, like that makes sense. It makes sense that you're feeling this way about what's happening to you. Acknowledging that it's that they have total, like that they totally, it totally makes sense that that's what they're experiencing. And not trying to immediately solve the problem.
So I would guess if you wanted to give someone advice, would it make
Mhm.
sense to say, like, think about it from a into the future perspective for the current issue and not like what you could have done instead?
Yeah, or even just asking someone, okay, well, um, if like what would help you feel safer? That because like with self-defense and stuff, that comes up a lot in my work. Some people take self-defense classes because it makes them feel more in control of themselves and of their bodies, and they feel like they're um, more powerful. And if, when it's presented from that standpoint of what would make you feel safer, what would make you feel like you have control again, that's a little bit different than saying, well, if you'd had self defense courses, it wouldn't have happened, because we don't even know if that would be true.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Just like kind of figure out with them, like, okay, what are how could this situation end up becoming better for you? And then like trying to, like, not even guide them, but just figure out together what can we even do moving forward to try and, make this situation smooth over as well as possible.
Mm-hmm. I saw somebody ask, does danger after the relationship is over sometimes last years? Yes, that it can. If somebody is experiencing like stalking, for example, that might last like it could last decades even. It really depends on the particular situation. But that's why it is important to make sure that we're not sharing other people's information in online or in person spaces without making sure they're okay with it. because I might have a partner from back in like high school who still to this day has a very negative opinion on me and would be very violent and aggressive if they found me today. So, so it's very important to consider that even if it's not something that happened recently. And then letting survivors make their own choices is really the most important thing that you can do, because in this situation, they had their choices taken away from them through coercion, through violation. So letting them know that they get to make the choice here is really helpful in bringing that power back into their space. So we've kind of already talked about this, but again, suggesting resources, suggesting what they can do, and then respecting your own boundaries and bowing out if it's something that you're not comfortable with or you don't think you're capable of doing. I always encourage people to think very carefully if they're going to engage with somebody who's been perpetrating any violence. Sorry, I'm like blowing through some of these slides just because I don't want to take up too much time. Because that could carry a safety risk and it could isolate you from the person you're trying to help based on how much control their abuser might have. And then creating safety plans can sometimes be a little bit safer, helping a person also find ways that they can take control of their life back again.
I guess an interesting thing about like our community though is like if you're trying to avoid someone in a relationship like this, right? Because we come together to like share a space, like how do you handle something like that without like, 'cause like if neither party wants to be removed from like a shared
Yeah, that can be very difficult. I think that is very situational, based on, okay, was it a particular behavior in the space that the person, like, is the person willing to maybe, for example, not drink alcohol when they're attending the space? Or if they're willing to only attend the space if they have like a certain person with them to kind of be like their accountability buddy, like to make sure that they don't interact. It might be even as simple as we can both be in this space, but you just do not talk to me, do not interact with me, like just don't acknowledge I exist. That's a little bit different in a situation though than if somebody currently has like a court case going on and something like that. In that case, there might be situations with my protective order says we can't be within 600 feet of each other. So in that scenario, it can be a little bit trickier. And there might not be a way to make everybody feel happy or make everybody comfortable. But it might just go down to what would be the safest response for our community.
Okay.
And I see somebody asked, how do you go about protecting others from people that have been harmful, abusive in the past without seeming like you're going out of your way to hold a grudge? If somebody is actively not making better choices, if they're actively not changing the behavior that they have been using to hurt or violate other people, I don't consider that holding a grudge or talking behind their back to let other people know that they are a safety concern. If somebody is showing that they are changing their behavior, the people they've hurt still have the right to share that. But it might also just be an opportunity for them to flex the skills that they've learned about respecting boundaries and respecting other people's choices. Being like, yeah, I did do those things, but this is how I'm actively taking responsibility for them. And seeking help for yourself is also important. I know that it can feel very stressful to deal with a movement in your community where it seems like a lot of difficult information's coming out. People that you felt comfortable with, maybe you don't feel as comfortable with them anymore, or there's just a lot of information that can be really stressful and triggering to deal with. So it's important to know that a lot of the resources that are here for people who've experienced something are also here for you as well. You're allowed to take a break and to limit what type of support you're offering another person. We can't all be everything to everybody. And I saw someone ask a little bit earlier if I'm starting to believe I'm in a long-term abusive relationship. what steps can I take to get myself out of it in a way that's safe for me? That might look different for different people. So I always encourage someone to reach out to a resource. We have a hotline that we run, which the number for that is 540-371-1666. And that is 24/7. But if you look up like local resources, those also, there's a lot of them in New York. There's a lot in like a lot of different areas, but New York tends to have a lot of resources for everything. But a lot of times, what a resource like a rape crisis center or a domestic violence shelter will do is process what do you have at your disposal, right? Do you have friends? Do you have family? Who can you stay with? Who can help with transportation? Who can help you save money? Just really helping dig through all the little things that you might need to get taken care of if it's a situation that you're ready to leave. And just being aware of things that, like, oh, do you have access to medication that you need? Do you have access to mental health support and to education and things like that? Yeah. I'm going to skip the practice slide just because, again, I don't want to run over time too much, and just go over some bystander intervention stuff. So it has a picture on it that I have pulled from a web series that I like, which is Carmilla, the web series. Yep. So in this scenario, Laura's friends all knew that her roommate was a vampire who specifically drank the blood of young ladies, and nobody said anything. So 3 guesses what happened there. So don't be like Laura's friends. If you know that something is sketchy, don't just not say anything, because that's how people get bitten. So when we talk about bystanders, it's just anybody who isn't directly involved in the situation. They're not directly experiencing the thing, or they're not directly doing the thing that's harmful. So all of you are bystanders when you're just at an event and there's people running around doing the things. And having a bystander, sometimes I've gotten responses where people are like, well, why should I have to take care of someone else's problems? But it can be really helpful to have someone else jump in and be a support when they don't know what to do about being violated or having their boundaries pushed, or if they're just used to that being the way that things are, especially if they've always been in abusive or unhealthy relationships or an abusive or unhealthy family. They might just not realize their boundaries matter. And also just in situations where the bystander is the one with power, right? If I'm the person who is popular, who is knowledgeable, who has clout in the scenario, then I can use that to support other people who might be experiencing harm. So there's a bunch of ways we can do this. One of these is to distract. This one's my favorite one because it's really good for people who maybe aren't very confrontational. So a lot of times this is good in like the middle of the situation, just giving the person a excuse to escape. So just asking them like, hey, can you show me where this is? I like your shirt, changing the subject essentially. If they're in the middle of a conversation with someone who's being really creepy or where it seems like it's escalating, giving them an opportunity to pull away from that is really helpful right in the moment. So this one's really good for like when you're really like right there seeing it happen. It also gives you an opportunity to pull the person away and ask them maybe if they need more help. So like if I hear somebody who's like making a lot of like angry comments under their breath at someone else, and I'm like, hey, can you help me carry this box in? And then as we're going in, I can be like, hey, I heard what they said to you. Do you need somebody else to give you a ride home tonight? Or do you want me to call you a Lyft, call you an Uber, or something like that? And that gives me a chance to do that when they're not standing next to a person who might influence their answer. Delegating seems like is a common one to do in communities like this, where there's like people who are organizers or people who are basically in charge of setting the rules and expectations for the space. And that's just finding other people who can be in a support in a way that maybe we can't. So saying, hey, there's somebody who's making new members uncomfortable. I'm going to go ask the manager of the space that we're in right now if they can ask them to leave, right? Because if somebody's like, hey, these go against my rules for the space, so you have to go, that can sometimes be a little less confrontational than just a random person saying, hey, I think you should leave. And they're like, well, you can't make me. Or saying, oh, my friend told me their story. I don't really know how to move forward from here. So I'm just going to send them the tip line information and explain how that works, because that might get them a result that I can't give them on my own. Somebody asked, what do we do as a community when the victim in question won't acknowledge they're being victimized? Unfortunately, that can be common. It can take somebody a really long time to acknowledge that they're experiencing harm. That doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can do. Making sure that that person has access to people if they ever do want to talk, and also just limiting their access to anything that might make the situation quote unquote worse. So like, if I know somebody where I'm like, that relationship is really not good, but I don't think that they're in the space to leave it anytime soon, making sure that if I invite them over, that maybe their partner's not present, or if their partner's like screaming at them in the middle of an event, using that distract to kind of pull them away from it so they're not experiencing it in real time, right? They might still think that that's totally fine and normal, but I've still given them an opportunity to break away from that. And also, like, just being consistent with letting them know that, hey, I'm here for you if you want to, if you ever decide this isn't what you want anymore, and continuing to let them know that it's not a, like, continuing to model, I guess, like a healthy friendship or healthy relationships, and give them an alternative to that. And also, you can report things to anonymous tip lines, or the cyber tip line through the National Missing and Exploited Children Network. That one's actually really good for if you see something online that appears to be exploitation, but you don't really know know the people very well, or you don't know where to go from there. You can anonymously report through that. Direct, I mentioned this a little earlier, but that's like telling a person straight up, you are a creepy person, or you're being creepy right now, or letting somebody know, hey, this other person's being creepy right now. It kind of, that one can be effective based on the person and the situation. But if everybody in a scenario is telling you that this is the standard for the space, then you're a lot more likely to respect it. So I have seen that be what's the word? I've seen that be successful in some scenarios, where somebody's kind of testing the waters of what they can get away with in a space. And it can also be helpful in just letting somebody know that, hey, if you see this happening, or if this is happening to you, this is how we respond to it here. And then finally, documenting. So this one is more useful for if it's something that maybe in the moment you don't really know how to act, or you know that you'll have a better situation dealing with it later. Just taking essentially evidence of it. So, oh, somebody said weird stuff to my friend on the server. My friend doesn't want to do anything, but I'm going to screenshot it in case they change their mind later, so we have evidence that it happened. So that can be useful, and also establishing a pattern. If 30 people all have their own separate evidence that a person has been creepy, and it's over a period of time and they're not changing their behavior, then that might be a person that needs to be expelled from the community, because they're not showing any sign of recognizing what they're doing is wrong or wanting to change.
Yeah, I feel like that's an important reason for why just like bringing up tiny issues is still really important. Because like if something's happening, even on like sort of a small scale, but like, you know, all over the place, like feel free to like bring this to the community leaders so that we can like just be informed about it and take appropriate action on it. Hopefully before anything even gets to the point of like these big powder kegs.
Mm-hmm. Some of the resources I have on here, I do want to highlight the cyber tip line, just because I've been recommending that to so many people. So if you see something where you're like, this feels really gross, this feels really exploitative, specifically of a child or a minor, you can anonymously report through that, and they will actually do a lot of the work to locate the person and see if they're safe. And the reason that I like it is you are not required to put in any of your own information. So if you're concerned about, I want to report this thing I know is happening, but I don't want anyone to know it was me who reported it, because of retaliation or whatever whatsoever goes into that, then that's not going to be logged through them. And it has some different options. There's stuff for like child sexual exploitation, child pornography, anything like that. It's also just useful if you see people like saying something on Twitter or something, and you're like, I have no idea who these people are, but that doesn't seem right. And endtechabuse.org has a lot of really great resources for collecting digital evidence, or safety plans or anything like that. Okay, I think I got all the questions so far.
Yeah, if we skipped over or didn't get to your question, do feel free to @helper or Shinjio in chat with questions during the Q&A section.
Yeah. So, this concludes the presentation part. So I guess we should move on to the Q&A section.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone has any questions that we didn't get around to or anything else,
Yeah.
feel free to give it to us. We have some questions that we got from community leaders that we're going to be going over right now, but we're happy to throw on anything at the end.
Yeah. So, who wants to, I guess, like read them out, and then we'll go from there. Because we're putting together like a filtered spreadsheet so that we can go through them one at a time. So, take it away.
Happy to go. So, how can you be a better bystander online with social media?
I would say that if you know the person who's sharing the information, ask them what you can do to best support them, and then just kind of go from there. Because being a bystander online can look a lot of different ways. So just making sure the individual person, that you're asking them, okay, how can I support you? Is that you want me to like report this somewhere? Do you want me to share something privately, something like that? I'm just asking first.
Okay, so actually, like the second part of this question is more like when people are calling people out online, like before responses, before anything. It's like if it's like a public accusation, what is like the best way to go about? I don't know, just like what are like the do's and don'ts of how to respond to something that you might not have all the information on, or just how to handle it if something's being handled in a very public way?
I think if something's happening in a public way, I would still ask the person what it is that they need for support, because I think it's important to acknowledge what role we're playing. For example, like I'm not a lawyer, so therefore it's not my job to legally determine whether something did or did not happen, whether something like evidence is appropriate or not appropriate. And also, my goal is not to put a person in jail or eject a person from society. So it's not my job as an advocate to question whether something did or didn't happen. And a lot of people might not have conclusive evidence that something happened, because at the time, especially if they didn't realize they were experiencing violence, they probably weren't taking note of every interaction that happened. They might not have any physical evidence that what they went through actually, quote unquote, happened. So just I would still approach it the same way, even if it's something that there's no proof, so to speak. And in order to in the sense of causing the least trouble, asking somebody how they can support, there might be things where I don't feel comfortable if they're like, oh, I want you to go and like send a hate message to this person to let them know that like what they did to me was terrible, that might cross my boundary. So also just letting them know that like, hey, these are kind of like what I'm comfortable with doing. I can listen to you if you want to talk, but I'm not going to do this particular thing that might get me in trouble. Does that make sense?
Okay, no, because I definitely feel like there's an amount of people they're afraid of the type of splash they'll cause with like coming out with something like even like against someone or just in general like how
Mm-hmm.
much attention they're bringing to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah, that's usually a very big concern. Is like who's going to know about this, or like what's going to happen if people do or don't believe what I'm saying is true.
mm, yeah. Okay. Anyway, so next question: how should event organizers approach interactions at public events between minors and adults? Should wristbands and other identifying markers for minors be provided by event staff, or what are your opinions?
I think that can be a good idea because it also can cut down on offering alcohol to somebody who I don't know is a minor or something like that. I think that identifying wristbands can be helpful. That does, of course, like mean that like people can easily take that off, unfortunately. Um, but I think just considering like, okay, like how available are things that are not appropriate for minors in the space? Like, are those things everywhere and we're just expecting minors to not see it or not interacting with it? Are there resources available? So like if we're in a public area, are there like, is there information? I know a lot of people will post like posters with helplines and stuff like that in the bathrooms. And then again, just like what are the general expectations of the space? Like, because if I'm creating a space that's for minors, I don't want to be talking about anything too sexually explicit or anything that's too graphic. So, is everybody aware that that's kind of the expectations for the space?
Okay. What are the proper steps to take if someone comes up to you at a tournament and tells you that they were just sexually assaulted, abused, harassed?
Definitely stay calm. Panicking doesn't help anything. Take the person to a quiet place, and then determine if there's like an immediate safety risk. So, like, are they going to go home with the person who is doing this thing? Does this person have like access to like their hotel room or something like that? And then ask if they're okay with you informing a particular person, whether that's like an event organizers, if they want you to contact a family member or law enforcement or something, and then just proceed. There might be some liability and legal issues if it's somebody who's under the age of 18 and you're considered a mandatory reporter, but I'm not sure how that applies in your spaces specifically.
Can you define a mandatory reporter?
So in a lot of um, like educational settings, especially, it's essentially where if they're employees of a space, they're legally required to report any evidence that a person, a minor specifically, has been abused. So, for example, if somebody were to call our hotline and they're 12 years old and they tell us that they're being sexually abused by their parent, we are required to report that to social services so that social services can make sure the 12-year-old and the parent are not like in the same space continuing to be abused. And that depends on the state that you're in. A lot of times it depends on because universities and community colleges are also required to be mandatory reporters in certain ways to receive federal funding. So I'm not sure if that would apply in your case.
Okay. But yeah, so you'd say that in general, to if
In
someone comes to
general,
you with like
yeah.
an issue that's like you just want to like first make sure that like they're safe now, and then just like from there try and figure out while you have witnesses and all that like how to bring it to the like authority of the space.
Yeah.
And I would just want to point out to anyone that if you're afraid to come forward with something that you know was uncomfortable, that will always take your consideration on what actions you want taken. So you don't have to like keep things with to yourself just under the idea of oh, if I come forward with this, there will definitely be a punishment if you, for whatever reason, did not want one, or if you just wanted awareness of an event, or for us to speak on your behalf. Anyway, next question. What memorizable steps can TOs or event staff take in situations that come up in person? For example, if someone calls an event staff person aside saying that someone sexually harassed them at an event, what are the immediate actions that should be taken here?
So again, determine if there's an immediate safety threat. Inform the person they violated the rules of the space. Based on what rule they violated, that might be a point where you ask somebody just like directly to leave. And then follow up with the person who has been harmed and make sure they know their resources and what steps will happen moving forward. Right. So if the person's like, if you've like, okay, we've asked this person to leave the event, does that mean that they're going to be banned from all future events or something like that? So immediate safety first. 2, inform the person they broke the rules, or they have to leave the space. And 3, follow up with the person who was harmed.
Okay. So next question. Sometimes it is not always clear when a matter should be handled publicly or privately. What criteria, if any, can help in making that decision?
Again, if somebody who's a minor has been assaulted or is being assaulted by an adult, especially if they live with them, then usually it will be reported and handled more publicly. Whether the survivor wants to go public, if they're an adult, should be taken into consideration because that can bring up a lot of negative responses, a lot of victim blaming. It could open up to retaliation. If somebody's perpetrated against multiple members of a community, or they're going from like community to community to community and just continuing to do the same things, then it might be necessary to make it public so that they're not just moving to another group that just to like perpetrate the same abuse. I do want to pause because somebody in the chat asked a question of, I've been publicly talking about my own harassment because I felt unheard or hurt. Is this method helpful for bystanders to know how frequently it happens? Can it help prevent more abuse, or am I just yelling into the void? I'm not sure this is like, if I'm totally understanding what you're saying, so I'm sorry if I don't like 100% respond. But sometimes knowing how frequent it is can be useful. Sometimes sharing our stories can be useful. I think that it's always important to note that you don't have to share your story with anyone you don't want to or who you don't feel heard by. You're not required to share your story in order to provide safety for somebody else. But there are always a lot of different options to share your story. And if somebody doesn't hear you in one space, they might hear you in like a support group setting. If you're attending a Take Back the Night, if you're attending an event where you want to be publicly heard, not every space is equipped to deal with public disclosure. Not everybody can handle hearing a public disclosure without being triggered themselves. But it's never a bad thing if you want your voice to be heard to be sharing that.
I would say that if you want to specifically try and create change in your own space, just like to be sure to at least send out that message to whatever leaders you feel like could actually take action on it, as well as just posting it publicly. Because there's never a guarantee that you're reaching the people you're hoping to.
Mm-hmm. And if somebody shares their story, letting them know that you believe them, that you are open to hearing about ways that you can support them better, if maybe that's been something that they have concerns about. And also just making sure that you're sharing their story in a way that's appropriate. I know some people where they were like, oh, I've posted on Facebook about my experience, but I only shared it with a specific people because not everybody knows. Right. Or, oh, I was in this video talking about my experience, but that video is only to be shown at this particular time at this particular event. It shouldn't be made like available to just anybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry to like jump out of the
no
questions.
Oh, no problem. I'd actually want to say, in the event that you're reaching out for support for somebody, are there any like sort of like just common things to like, what are the common ways to offer support for someone? Like even from a
Ooh.
bystander perspective, but also from a tournament organizer or some sort of empowered position.
Definitely just being open to hearing about what they need in order to feel safe. So sometimes that can extend to I need this person to not interact in this community anymore, which can be complex to deal with in some cases. In some cases, it's pretty simple. It really depends on how the person takes that. But in general, just making sure that you're following up with that person. So if you're like, okay, we'll make sure that you have a safe ride home at the event for the next couple weeks. Then following up and being like, so how did that go? Right? Did it go well? Would you like to continue doing that? Or is that something that isn't working out? Or, yeah, we received your response on the anonymous form and we provide you with these resources. Is there something else that you need from us? Right. So following up, I think, can be helpful.
Yeah, I guess just another layer of always be, take your own boundaries seriously. And if something
Yeah.
isn't being handled the way, in a satisfactory way for your comfort, like always like be comfortable to like escalate that conversation into like trying to figure out something that'll end up working.
Yeah, for sure.
Next question. If an individual does not feel safe or secure reporting to event staff or tournament organizers, what steps can be taken so that the report can be made known or that space can be made more secure, safe?
That's one of the reasons I really liked your anonymous form, and that it was available so openly. I think also just in general, creating a culture where people feel like they can trust other people in order to share their experiences does a lot of that work. If people feel like they've seen other people be respected and embraced by sharing their stories, then they're more likely to do that as well. I think also I've seen some spaces where they've kind of um, taken an approach of, okay, you tell us what you think you've seen in other places that would work, right? What have other communities been doing? Because naturally, a lot of people are having a Me Too movement right now and have been for the past like 3, 4 years. So seeing what have other people done that worked really well, and then also seeing what gaps in education are maybe there that we need to address.
Okay. Somewhat in an extension to the last question, what steps can be taken to make specifically online spaces safer?
First off, I would say clear and consistent expectations for what is acceptable behavior, and then what we will do if that behavior those boundaries have been transgressed. Um, a lot of sites that have a really poor response to online exploitation, especially, it's because it's not consistent. It's because the rules don't apply the same way to everybody. And I think also just having different options for people with different needs. So, for example, with the pandemic, we had to switch a lot of our services to being online. Some of those services were provided like educationally through Zoom, but Zoom is not not encrypted very well. It's not a confidential um, platform. So when we do support groups, we don't use that. We use the help room through the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network because that one is like confirmed to be anonymous and confidential. So making sure that we also have options for different things.
Okay. So next question. What type of education / training, if any, do you think is necessary for event organizers and community leaders to have in order to properly mediate and handle cases of sexual misconduct and harassment?
Understanding what sexual misconduct and harassment are is very important, and understanding what bystander intervention can look like. I would not suggest if people don't have a background or training in restorative or transformative justice that they just start doing it because that is a lot. That's a very complex process. So I would suggest, in terms of like training, that's really what I would encourage for if you're trying to do a restorative justice, which is the sense of, well, I don't want this person to be kicked out of the community, or I don't want them to have any kind of like legal consequence, but I do want them to commit to not doing harm. That's not something I would suggest just anybody is qualified to mediate or to do.
Okay. How can we help people understand the distinction between supporting the victim and attacking the alleged perpetrator before there was an opportunity for the alleged offending party to defend themselves?
Different survivors need different things. And I think what I see a lot of when people are over focusing on a perpetrator, um, that in a way that's not actually supporting the person who was harmed, right? If I'm make a Twitter account so I can tweet at a person calling them all kinds of horrible names, that's not necessarily doing anything to support the person who was harmed, right? They're still struggling with trauma, they're still feeling alone and unheard. Me putting all of my attention on the person who committed harm or the person who I think committed harm, that might not actually be doing anything good for the person who experienced it. So I always encourage people, if you want to show your support for a survivor, it's going to be more effective to do that if you're actually engaging with the survivor and asking them what it is that they need and how you can support them, rather than pouring a lot of negative feelings on the person who perpetrated that harm. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Next question. How can minors safely get to and from events? What options are there besides carpooling? Oh, that's sort of...
Yeah. I don't think carpooling is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's more concerning in the sense of, again, one person's kind of getting that access, and it's being specifically used as like, I want to be alone with X person, so I'm going to drive them to events. I think just, again, having options like, okay, I could go with X person, but there's also the opportunity for like going with a group of people my own age, or we all take the bus together, or we all take a Lyft or an Uber, or we all just like bike downtown or something like that. I think just making sure that we also clarify there's should never be any strings attached in those scenarios, right? Just because someone gives you a ride doesn't mean that you owe them a romantic or sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it could really extend further into like what are the expectations of a carpool versus like whether or not it's like proper to do, or I don't know.
Yeah. It's like pretty much any situation, if there's strings attached, like somebody could buy me lunch and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if they're buying me lunch because they think by buying me lunch, they're going to get sex from me, then that becomes a really uncomfortable situation, right? So it's not the specific situation so much as it's the context of why are they doing the thing.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the concern does come from if someone doesn't know someone well enough, if they're ever alone one-on-one by the end of a ride or something. Is that like a safe space for a minor to be with someone much older than them?
Yeah, that might be a serious concern. So that might be like I always encourage people to have like a buddy or a partner if they're going someplace where they're not familiar with the environment or not familiar with the people. And I definitely like personally, I wouldn't like accept a ride from somebody I don't know well, or accept like a ride alone from somebody I don't know well. But I know that that's different for different communities or different people.
Okay. When we see adults and minors spending a lot of time together, is it better to be extra noisy? Nosy, or mind our own business? Better safe than sorry?
I personally feel like I would interrogate that, because especially if there's a lot of like kind of romantic or sexual energy, like why couldn't the adult find another adult with to have that? Like I don't
Yeah,
know.
for sure.
Yeah, I'm like I just don't trust it. But I would probably be extra nosy just to check in and be like, hey, like I noticed you've been spending a lot of time with this person. Like I just want to make sure that it's okay, or I just want to make sure that like you're aware of like the rules of the space. Yeah, because I don't know. Most of the time when I've seen adults and minors spending a lot of time together, it's not for positive reasons.
And I guess generally this just goes with whether or not you're involved in a situation. If you feel like your general idea of boundaries are being pushed, it's like, okay, like you can talk to someone in charge, or if you feel like you have an avenue to reach out to either of those two people, like investigating it,
Yeah.
just like cautiously.
Yeah.
There's not, there's no harm meant.
Yeah, and also then like even if nothing quote unquote bad is happening, then at least that person knows that you're still looking out for them and that you're a safe person to go to if something else happens or someone else does something. So it still also will go a long way in kind of establishing the environment and making people feel like, okay, this is a safe space. People care about me in this community. They wouldn't want anything bad to happen to me.
It absolutely could even like open their eyes to just seeing like, oh, I didn't even understand that this could be perceived as strange, even if it happened to not. It's just like creating
Yeah.
like the education of like what to look out for, what generally we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, for sure.
Do we have any more questions?
There is a question here from Bonk.
If we're friends with someone that perpetrated, how do we tell them our concerns or support their change? That's a great question. That can also look a lot of different ways. Sometimes sitting down with a person and telling them that you've noticed the way that they treat other people is not responded to well. Sometimes people's will respond to that and be like, okay, well, like, I don't want to do that anymore. How do you think I should respond? Um, if somebody is not committed to doing that work, then that you can't make them do it. It has to be up to them to want to do better. If they do want to do better, then that's great. And some things that you can do is being again, I think I used the term accountability buddy a little bit earlier. So if they're like, okay, like when we go to a space, will you go with me? And if you see any of my patterns coming out or any of my behavior, like call me out or pull me aside, like make an excuse for us to leave so that I can get myself together. Sometimes that can be helpful. Another thing that can be helpful is if there's specific directives that their survivor has said they want. So if they're like, hey, I want you to pay for my therapy that I need because of what you did to me. Sometimes it can be helpful in the sense of, okay, well, how can I help you with that goal, right? Do you need help finding a job so that you can meet that need for that person? But again, that kind of goes more into like restorative justice, which can be a little complex and a little intensive.
Okay.
Oh, I have a question regarding that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned, like the accountability that the perpetrator would have to take responsibility for. What kind of steps can we as a community take to, facilitate facilitates those steps to if, for example, they wanted to come back into that space, what kinds of things should we be expecting from them, or what kind of criteria should we be looking for so that to even determine if they should be welcomed back in the space in the first place, I guess.
I think that depends a lot on what was the harm, how severe was it, and also like has it been consistently perpetrated against a lot of people or a lot of communities? Because if somebody's been doing the same creepy stuff for like 30 years and they've gone through multiple processes of like going out of the community, coming back in, going out, coming back in, then there's not really a lot of trust there to build on. It also depends a lot on what the the people they've harmed want. If people they've harmed are not comfortable with them entering the community again, then you run the risk of forcing the person who's been harmed out of the community, if you even consider letting them back into the space. I think that in my experience, if somebody has shown that they have a greater understanding of certain behavior, if they're able to sit and listen to someone describe how they harmed them without getting defensive or making excuses or trying to minimize what happened, then I think sometimes it can happen where they can re-enter that community. But again, it's very contingent on what was the harm. Like if somebody for example, if somebody like misgendered me one time, and then they come back into the space saying like, okay, I understand why pronouns are so important. It won't happen again. And if it does happen again, like call me out on it immediately and I will like apologize without trying to like minimize it or brush it off. Then that's different than somebody who has like persistently like mocked me for my gender or tried to pick a fight in that sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. Thank you.
Okay, so we had another question come in. If we notice that someone shows strange or concerning behaviors but haven't harmed anyone so far, can we get them help before it's too late?
Yes, you can if they're open to addressing those behaviors while they're still small boundary pushers or if they're still strange or concerning. If somebody's willing to shift their framework, it's actually a lot easier if it's something that doesn't have as serious outcomes. If it's just like little things. A lot of times if somebody has a foundation of trust with that person and they're like, hey, I'm not saying this to attack you, but I just really want to make sure that your interactions with other people and our interactions with other people are healthy. And I think this is a good way that we can learn how to do that. Then if they respond well to that, then I would highly encourage to do that.
Yeah, I feel like any disagreement there from the offending party would probably just be from a lack of education. So actually, a question I have is, as like community leaders, what sort of methods could we take to try to like educate our community so that they're able to like be aware of these things to avoid, as well as be able to act as good bystanders to inform perpetrators or just like give organizers a heads up? Like, what are some strategies people have taken to even like get the information out there as far as education?
If you have resources or information or education that has been really helpful for you, then I would highly encourage spreading that everywhere that you can, with everyone that you can, and also making it consistent. In our field, we typically encourage people to not just do like one training or one workshop one time, but to continue to engage with the information like essentially for the rest of forever, hopefully. But just to continue engaging with that information, continuing to like research and educate yourselves and look for things that have really clicked with you and with other people. So if you go to like, I've been doing a lot of like workshops and stuff like that. If you'd be interested, I can share those with you as well. But even just Googling like consent or healthy relationships, there's so much information out there, and just continuing to really engage with it and letting people know that it was helpful for you can sometimes work really well in making it more of a consistent learning process.
Okay, so this could pretty much manifest itself just as like sharing posts of things or just like actual like educational material.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is going to be our last question. How do we feel about having wearable pins denoting pronouns in the same vein of wristbands denoting age?
I think that that can be really helpful because obviously you can't just tell looking at a person. So having anything on their person that can kind of indicate that is really helpful. With age, again, like it still kind of runs into the issue of somebody might just take it off or like pick one that's not actually relevant to them. So sometimes that can be frustrating. But I think that at least giving people the option will still be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we could just like have it available to people as just like a way
Yeah.
to, for way to more, I don't know, effortlessly put
Mhm.
put across that point if they wanted to.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we're going almost to the 2-hour mark here. This has been really fantastic stream. I'm really happy to see how everyone has tuned in, and we really covered some really amazing topics. Alex, thank you very much again for helping us do something like this.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you guys putting in all your time and your energy.
Yeah. So we're going to be putting this live stream on YouTube in like the next day or so. We'll try and put as much resources as we can in the description. So be on the lookout for that. We'll obviously be sharing it out and tweeting it out. And you know, this is just a tool that we can more easily hand out to people in our community. So just because they weren't here today doesn't mean they have an excuse to miss out on it. Let's get the word spread as far as we can. Let's yell to the high mountaintops, making sure that everyone is aware of.
If
Yeah.
if people have any questions they have, watching the VOD for this or want to reach out to you personally, Alex, is there something that they can get on or use?
Yeah, if they want to reach out to me, my email is prevention@rcasa.org. That's just for general questions. And then I already shared the hotline, but I'll share it again since it's 24 hours. It's 540-371-1666. So that's not direct to me. That's just like to our agency. So I might not be the person who picks up, but that's just for crisis intervention and support.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll have that information in the description of the YouTube upload when it goes up. Yeah, so thank you everybody for tuning in. We know that DNA Thursday Weekly is going to be starting very soon, so if you haven't already, sign up for that, and let's try and grow our community in more ways than one. We gotta grow. We gotta up the maturity.
Yeah. Like we were saying, if there was anything that has like helped you, like share it. If there was anything in this presentation that you felt like, oh yeah, it's something I hadn't like completely considered, like feel free to disseminate this information. The more we all know about it, the more we all speak up about things that we're inherently uncomfortable about, the less it's ever going to escalate, the more we're all going to be aware, and everyone will hopefully be comfortable.
Yeah. And remember, for all of like what region you are specifically from, we've been handing out templates of our tip line so that each, micro community can like they know your own scene best, right? So if you're in the New York scene and you want to reach out to House of 3000, you can go to house3000.nyc/tipline. And there'll be other tip lines available in the tri-state area. Kind of helps all of us orgs like stay separate, but able to keep each other in check. So you can report to different orgs who are neighbors, and we can all like handle everything accordingly. So if you are a community leader and you want to set up your own tip line, just reach out to us on twitter.com/house3000, and we will get you the template for that set up. So you can help foster your own community.
Or even if you're just like in a part of a community that doesn't have that sort of resource, like tell them to like reach out to us. We'd gladly do it. If you want to tell us to tell them why they should set one up if they see, I'll gladly write a small paragraph.
Okay. So with that, many thanks to Churb, Dill, Helper, Geo, RJ, all of you for tuning in, and especially Alex for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we'll be seeing you guys later, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.
Have a good night.
Have a good day, guys.